You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by FreightPlus. I'm your host, Scott McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. Spooky month is over. October's been done and dusted. It's dark before 5 p.m. right now. I know every meme in the world is trying to say hold back, but come on, I'm a dad. I'm going to have to mention how dark it gets and how annoyed I am. But that also means one thing. It's the October market reports out. So we brought Chris Peckham on, our VP of operations, to talk about what we saw in the marketplace, kind of go through it. Once again, a very scary time of year, regardless of what's happening in the market, because it's always going to be scary in transportation, right, Chris?
Yeah. Not a lot of positive news in October, unfortunately.
Not a lot of positive news in 2021.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair statement.
Oh, geez. Let's jump right into it. I mean, especially in October, there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of M&A. Why is this happening? How important is this to the industry?
Yeah, so the most recent one that we saw was Hub Group acquiring Chop Tank, and Chop Tank is a broker who specifically plays more in the refrigerated space. Now, Hub, it helps them vertically integrate, so they're controlling more of their supply chain, not leaving things to chance. So you're seeing more and more companies do this. You know, Maersk on the international side is a really good example of they want to be a fully integrated solutions provider. So they have the ocean freight piece. They're investing heavily in air freight, meaning they're buying planes. They've always been in the warehousing space, but they're focused more on that and their technology. So they're trying to truly vertically integrate. So I think this is just going to be something that we continue to see.
Is it because of the emergence of kind of the private equity and the venture capital money kind of coming into the system, the spotlight on the areas of the supply chain that were failing, and that's why we're seeing more M&A right now? Or?
Yeah, well, companies are hitting record profits, right? So
right.
They're a lot in a much better cash position to go out and do something like this. You know, we've seen it in the LTL space, and we're just seeing it across the board. So yeah, and there's just a ton of private equity money.
Now, is this good for companies, like especially transportation programs? Like, is this good for your logistics operation?
It could be. If this were to continue to an extreme level, then you actually reduce competition.
Right.
But the truckload space is big enough where you could definitely absorb some consolidation. And overall, I mean, if companies are doing this so they can be a better logistics provider, then it should be a good thing for a customer.
Yeah, I would assume that it brings a little more sophistication and standardization into the industry, which is something that, especially in the truckload space, can sorely be missing, right?
Yep.
Onto something that we know is probably not going to be good for the industry, and something that really was hot off the presses last week to the point where it kind of made it hard for us to put out the market report because of how much news was changing. The vaccine mandate. Talk to me, because I was on a roundtable call where, like, literally on Friday last week, they're like, there's a bunch of shippers, a lot of like logistics people, and they're like, oh my God, they just pushed back the vaccine mandate to trucking companies. This could be great. Like, it's chaos, but like, why is this such an important thing for this industry?
Yeah. So based on some surveys, it looks like around half of current truck drivers today are not vaccinated. And of the half that are not, there's another third that say they have no plans on getting a vaccine anytime soon. What could happen is if the mandate goes through and the trucking industry doesn't get an exemption, you could just see drivers just take themselves off the road, right? And we already know what's happening with capacity constraints. This could be a really, really bad thing. Take politics out of it. You're talking about a driver who's in a cab, right? So that doesn't seem to me like they're going to be, a really high spreader of COVID, right? It's
right.
not like they're working in an enclosed space with a whole bunch of other people. They're typically alone in a cab as their job. So, I hopefully an exemption comes through, because this could be disastrous.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the other side of it, right? Of like, you're traveling across state lines, like you do catch it, you're probably spreading it more than anyone. Like, not that you're really interacting, but it's something that it's so interesting. I mean, it's so. Do you think one thing that the roundtable I was on, they were talking a lot about this, is just the optics of calling it a mandate seem to be one thing that a lot of people don't like. And we talk about truckers, we know their attitude and their kind of independent spirit.
Yeah.
Do you think that the optics of this are something that's kind of why the vaccine mandate is kind of such a big triggering issue in the industry right now.
Yeah, I think most people don't enjoy being told what to do.
Right.
Right. So when you use words like mandate, and it's going to be enforced, and all of that stuff, it's just to steal your word. It's just bad optics there.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting, like, it was a long conversation we had about just like, what do you do? Like, it's well past the point of like, if you change the word to something else that people are, because I know they're starting to call it requirement and things like that. You're like, yeah, bro, you went too long with mandate.
Right.
Last thing before we kind of start jumping into specific modes, let's just talk cost. I mean, what did we see transportation cost in the month of October?
Yeah, costs continue to rise across the board. We did see a little bit of a softening in the dry van space in terms of rejections, but as we've said before, it tells me that more shippers are locked in with contracted pricing. So you're seeing less rejections from primary carriers, but the reefer space that went on a run late in October, and the Midwest specifically is getting crushed in terms of rejection rates. So the national average is about 36 in the reefer space. And there are points in the Midwest that are above 80.
Now, capacity is also still huge capacity issues in truckload, right?
Massive, yeah. Yep. Across, dry van, flatbed, and reefer.
Man, there's just like not one version of that's calming down. Like,
no, we really haven't seen what I would consider a material change in capacity, rejections, costs, like nothing. It's still super elevated. Super restricted in terms of capacity, and there's not a real end in sight.
Yeah, so no indicators that are telling you, hey, just wait for this a little bit. I mean,
yeah, maybe after the holidays it comes back down a little bit, but and we talked about how interconnected everything is. When we still see import volumes super jacked up, and that has no end in sight, because even after you get through the holidays, then you get Chinese New Year coming right around the corner, and everybody's going to try to pull in before Chinese New Year. So there isn't really an end that I see.
Man, Nostradamus, you're really not doing good for this.
No.
I feel bad for everyone involved. But hey, we got to create content. Let's move over. Let's go into less than truckload. How did less than truckload perform in the month of October?
Same issues that we've been seeing, driver shortages, the inability to attract new drivers in, even with, some pretty significant bonuses and pay increases that are out there. And as we were talking about the vaccine mandates, the LTL space could be even more significantly impacted just because it's not fragmented like the truckload space, right? So you've got 25 LTL carriers that make up 90% of the market, and all of those have more than 100 employees, right? So if there is not an exemption, then I would expect the less than truckload space to be impacted even more severely than the truckload space.
Well, I mean, the exemption isn't just drivers, right? It would have to be the warehouse. Like, I'm sure it has to be a little more far-reaching for LTL. Like, you're almost kind of saying, like, LTL is going to be, this mandate's going to affect LTL.
Yep, no doubt about it. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move over into intermodal. How did intermodal perform in the month of October?
Still significant issues. The UP actually stopped accepting westbound cargo for a week in October just to try to clean out their network a bit. But imports are still super high. I think everybody at this point is aware of all the congestion issues, and this is not just a Southern California problem. We see it up and down the East Coast, up and down the West Coast. Even though, Southern California between Los Angeles and Long Beach, they hit a record of 80 vessels at anchor.
Right.
But you're still seeing that outside Savannah. You're seeing it in New York, New Jersey. Now the Pacific Northwest is getting beat up a bit too.
Yeah, that's like I wrote down in my notes. It's like dwell time, equipment shortage, no relief. Oh my.
Yeah. The dwell time continues to be problematic. So even when the containers discharge from a vessel, there's terminal dwell time, and then when it actually makes it over to a rail ramp, there's dwell time there. So it's just like one issue compounding after another.
And then one thing I know it's been talked a lot, I've read a decent amount about it. It's the whole chassis equipment shortage. We've talked a little bit about this in previous things, but can you just give me kind of another overview? why chassis? What does this all mean? Why is there an equipment shortage?
Yeah, well, when you have volumes like this, and naturally you're going to be running tight, so it's not just the actual containers; it's the chassis that they need to ride on. And chassis management forever and ever has been historically mismanaged. And now, truckers are frustrated because they may have to go to one terminal to pick up a chassis, even when one's finally available, but then they got to return it to a different terminal. It ends up being a two-way move, and it just crushes productivity. And in the good old days, a dray driver could do 4 or 5 turns per day. So that would just be going in, picking up a container, and they would get paid, compensated just based on the number of turns that they did. Now they're lucky if they're getting 1 per day. And what the other elephant in the room is just the long, the extraordinarily long amount of time it takes for a driver just to get into a terminal.
Right.
You can find plenty of pictures out there that just show trucker after trucker after trucker waiting in line. And then when they do get in, they're not getting in and out quick.
Yeah, I know. I read a lot that the truckers are just getting, for lack of a better term, pissed. It's like, oh, driver shortage. No one wants to do this. And then they're like, no, we want to do this. Look at this line.
Right.
Like, of course, we're trying to help out. Of course, we want to be the heroes that are saving America and helping the supply chain. But it's kind of ridiculous at how everything this operation is running. I mean, one thing, there's so much focus on this, and I know there's so much dedication to try to solve it. Are there any solutions that you've heard of, kind of given just that you're so in the weeds, you're so listening to anything? Is there anything that you hear that's like, hey, this is actually something that's a little interesting of how they're trying to relieve the congestion? Or is it all just kind of like, man, this is just fluff. Like, this is really nothing.
Yeah, I haven't seen any well-developed plan, because you have to have all the players at the table, right? You got to have the harbor truckers, you got to have the ocean carriers, you got to have the terminal operators. And now, we just saw that there's going to be a fee for any container that sits for more than 9 days. It's $100, but that it's $100 additional each day. So if you had a container that had sat for 30 days, you would be billed $46,500. So, and this is going to be a charge levied from the port back to the carriers. But the carriers, the ocean freight carriers, have been very vocal and just said, we're just going to pass it right on to our customers. So we're not going to pay it. Customers are going to pay it. So if you're a shipper, and say a small shipper, and you got to pay spot rates, say you just paid $20,000 just to get a container over here, and then it sits and you're getting hit with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in additional charges. I mean, it's to me, it's just not a very well-developed plan.
So no, there's absolutely nothing right now. I know I've read a couple of things, but it just reads as kind of media fluff. And when you really dive down into it, a lot of times it's like, oh, this person, this quote unquote expert that has the perfect solution that we aren't trying, their solution just so happens to align with the exact kind of product they offer.
Yeah.
You're like, of course that's the solution.
Yep. Because it's not just any one thing. I mean, it's a combination of a whole bunch of things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about that, the fee, because I think that's kind of the big movement in October of what happened in the ocean market, which is mainly just this kind of, hey, we're going to try to implement some programs to move this stuff along.
Yeah, it's just a fee that's going to be billed from the port, like I was saying, back to the carriers, and the carriers are just going to push it back to the shippers. So if you're a small, medium-sized shipper and you're already paying astronomical rates for containers, you could be hit with another charge just as big, if not bigger, coming to you from your ocean carrier. So
this is, to me, it feels, and maybe I'm wrong, right? Probably most likely wrong, but we already talk about the spot rate for a container being just unheard of levels. Mm-hmm. I mean, does $100 fee? I know you kind of just broke it down, but like, is it really, if I'm willing to pay that point, like really my margins are probably just, my product sells like, yeah, I need to have my product over here. The fees are the fees. I'll just figure it out when I have to. Or is this like, is it something that's just to appease the masses, or is this really like
I don't know who it appeases, because if I'm a shipper, this is crippling. I mean, it's absolutely crippling. And listen, the Walmarts, the Targets, like what we talked about, Lowe's, Depot, they're not paying $20,000. Right. But they're still paying 3 to 4 times more than what they did pre-pandemic. And yes, some of those larger volumes should be moving within 9 days, but there are plenty of containers out there that, if this was going into place today, would already have fees stacked against them. So to me, it's just, again, not very well thought out.
Yeah, we talk like the trickle down effect of just like the movement of product. But now if you're adding like a fee for something that you're like, the reason wasn't because like I was being lazy. Like we all want our product here. We imported as much as we possibly could because we are record lows in inventory.
Yeah.
Like I want it here just as badly as you want it off your port. Why the hell would you charge me for this? I'm trying to do it.
Yep.
Go fix the line.
Right.
Go fix the chassis problem. Go fix those things before you're going to start pointing the finger at me.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Just wonderful. Anything else in ocean that someone should pay attention to?
No, I mean, we saw a little bit of softening in costs, but it's still, so it dropped from, say, 20,000 in certain trade lanes down to like 16 or 17. But that to me is still like super elevated, right? And they started to go back up towards the end of the month too. So not really any great noise there, unfortunately.
Any have like the stuff with like the rolling blackouts in China, has that affected anything in the ocean, or is that kind of
that kind of contributed to there being more available capacity, which in turn brought down some of the rates? But like we've been saying, even if there are some rolling blackouts, the production's still coming. Right. So just because there was a little bit of softening in capacity and rates, all of that still is going to get produced and it's going to need to ship.
The demand's still here and nothing's changed. People are still ordering everything off of the Amazon and all these other places. So that's not changing. All right, let's run over some indicators. I don't know why we still do indicators when it never looks good, but let's talk a little bit about indicators in the month of October. I know the Purchaser Manages Index, nothing really changed there for October, but I'm a little interested in, anything you want to talk about that before I jump into what I'm want to talk about?
No, I mean, it's still in that expansionary range, right? It came in over 60. And that's a healthy thing, showing that there's still a lot of domestic production there. It's good for our economy.
Right.
It's just not great for the transportation space. Right?
Now, you mentioned that inventory is like in the too low category. I mean, do we expect to see that change anytime soon? Is like we talk about the freight kind of moving through and stuff. I mean, I feel like it's been in that category since summertime. Like when does that change, or is it just it's not because the demand is still so high?
Yeah, I think that you'll see some improvement here, but again, we're at an all-time low in the whole inventory to sales ratio.
Right.
But what you've seen is every company is trying to just pull in as much as they can so they can have stuff on the shelf for the holidays. And, some of the big retailers out there, Lowe's and Depot, both reported that, their inventory positions is significantly better than where they were last year.
Right.
So I don't think that we're going to see the mass hysteria of potential stockouts that, some doomsday people like to report on.
Yeah, back in September when everyone's like freaking out about you're not going to get anything. Right. Christmas is canceled, all that stuff. Way to go, Mass. Way to go, media. Freaked everyone out. All right. How about fuel? How did, we did do an amazing podcast about 2 weeks ago that everyone can check out to try to understand the cost of fuel and where these prices kind of get created. But what happened in fuel? Any new changes since we last talked? Anything?
Yeah, fuel continued to rise, although, the most recent release from the EIA this week, it wasn't a huge rise week on week, but over, I think it's like 8 out of the last 9 weeks, we've seen an increase in the price of fuel. And again, I'm still projecting that to come back down a bit. It's just trying to define what a bit means.
Right.
So nobody's got a crystal ball, but I do expect that to soften. In fact, the EIA put out their 2022 projection for on-highway diesel to be around $3.22, whereas today it's at $3.73.
All right. Well, that's not too bad. All just stuff to look forward to. And again, that podcast is already out. So if you want to understand the rising fuel costs, we have a podcast. You can go listen to it. Last thing before we wrap, and this was kind of a fun, interesting thing you put out there, but just about net zero carbon. And there's like, you've just put out a tiny little list of what needs to be done to make it achievable. But I'd love to know kind of why in this report did you want to focus on that for the more you know?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that net zero emissions is out there. And I don't think everybody, present company included, understood it, right? And I just got curious. And I was like, geez, you're hearing about this everywhere. And, we have the environmental conference that's happening right now in Europe. And you just hear, in every space about what a carrier is doing to better control greenhouse gases and get to net zero. So I wanted to break it out and just make it a little bit more digestible. So that way, if you're in a meeting in your company, you can talk about this stuff, right? Maybe it spurs your own company to make some decisions, some better decisions that are more environmentally friendly.
Anything surprise you when you're kind of doing your research?
No. It was just super interesting to me. And it's not a space that I've spent a ton of time in. And you know me well enough. Once I get curious about stuff, I don't tend to let go of it. But no, it was just something interesting topic, and it's obviously getting a lot of attention in our space.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, reading about that, hearing about it, it was just something that was interesting to me. Any low-hanging fruit that like a transportation program could start doing right now based off your research? Anything that they're like, hey, I know kind of this is sort of the practice, but if you just do this little tweak, it's probably going to help you start to get closer.
Yeah, it's whether it's the big push for electric vehicles, right? That's coming, and that's obviously going to be a key one. But the pricing right now, it's not really attainable for a lot of those smaller companies to make an investment and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say there's any one big thing that's out there, but when you read through it, you can see, hey, if I could pick a little bit out of all these different areas, then it does start to move the needle.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a really cool thing. And I mean, when you get interested, you definitely get interested. I saw IMO 2022 is coming up. I can't wait to start talking about that again.
Yep, absolutely.
But Chris, the market report's out now. If you go to freightplus.io-aux-market-report, it's all there. Link in the show notes, on the blog, kind of everywhere you want to find it. It's going to be available. Just chock full. I mean, you do a great job going through, really reading it, giving good perspective. Like, hey, I don't have time to really try to break down these numbers that I see in DAT and all these other places. Here's what this stuff means. Yep. Here's what I can look at. So awesome report that you continue to put out. And I thank you for joining me today.
Great stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye. And that's our show. You can download the market report right now on freightplus.io. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll.